Welcome to the Anime Audiophile Podcast. Please like and subscribe for more. Thank you. Shikamaru Hiden, A Cloud Drifting in the Silent Dark. The Land of Silence Chapter 1. After running for 3 days and nights, Shikamaru and his team arrived in the Land of Silence. The Land of Silence was a small nation on the western edge of the continent. About 70% of the land was surrounded by mountains and forest, while the plains that made up the remaining 30% dotted the various regions of the country. The towns built on these plains were village-sized at best. For the three ninja, coming from Konoha in the Land of Fire, one of the 5 great nations, this nation seemed like nothing more than rustic countryside. The village of Tobari, the capital of the Land of Silence, was in the middle of the country. Once they crossed the border, Shikamaru and his team slipped through hills and fields to arrive there near the evening on the 4th day after leaving Konoha. Although it was a poor country, the village at its heart did have a certain urban air to it. Unlike the straw roofs of the houses in the other villages they had seen, even the smallest of the houses in Tobari had wonderful tiled roofs. There were also many buildings of reinforced concrete, and the town was neatly arranged into sections. The streets were in the shape of a spiderweb. On land subdivided into layers of concentric circles with roads radiating outward from the center, civilian homes and apartment buildings stood side by side. At the center of these circles was a conspicuously large building. When seen from outside the village, this building alone protruded from the cluster of homes and other structures. Rising up a dozen or more floors, the building was adorned with deep red roofs to demarcate each story, with a gold lion at every corner of the dazzling tiled roof coloring the top floor. It would appear that this structure is this land's castle. Quit with the smug observations. We can all see that it is. Walking along a large road that led into the heart of the village, Shikamaru listened to his companions with one ear as he looked up at the castle. They had long since taken off their Konoha ninja gear. When the customs of the country changed, so did the ninja gear. For the gear they would need to sneak into the village, the 2 members of the Umbu had proposed that local procurement would be best, and he had agreed, so they had slipped into the wealthiest-looking mansion in a village along the way to Tobari and found some clothing they could change into. They closed robes at the chest, tied nobi belts at the hip, and wore something like wide hakama trousers on their lower halves, stuffing these into knee-high boots and tucking in the hems. This was apparently the dress of the Land of Silence. The robe was extremely staid, without the slightest hint of a pattern or design. And it wasn't that the robe Shikamaru and his team had stolen happened to be plain. The people walking through the village of Tobari were also all in sober colors, browns and blacks and grays. The signs of the shops were also subdued in color, with not a hint of anything resembling neon. It was a city, but there was none of a city's vibrancy. "Do you gain a sense of it, Lord Shikamaru?" Rose said, walking in front of him. Shikamaru walked, wedged between the 2 members of the Umbu, who excelled at infiltration. Ro was guarding the front. Ro's question was just too vague. With no limit on exactly what he should be sensing, he couldn't answer. When he stayed silent, Ro answered his own question, as though he had had it ready right from the start. "There is no sign of any subordinates who would be serving the daimyo." "You're right about that." As they spoke, their feet carried them directly toward the castle. They didn't have any particular aim in heading in that direction. Their feet simply turned toward the largest building. They wouldn't be foolish enough to recklessly charge into it or anything like that. It is only citizens who stroll through the town. That we could come this far and see nothing of attendants is mysterious, Ro announced in his peculiarly old-fashioned way, an observation that was quite accurate. The daimyo were the ones actually ruling over the nations of the continent. The ninja never stood on the public stage of government. It was only natural that the daimyo would have their residence in the village at the center of that nation, and that the daimyo's stronghold would be home to any number of attendants taking care of the daimyo. And attendants who served the daimyo were distinct from ordinary citizens. They were more splendidly adorned than the average person, with a slightly haughty demeanor. It was strange that they hadn't seen any such attendants as they walked through the town. "Maybe there's, no daimyo," Soka whispered. Some of the smaller nations had no actual daimyo, they ran their governments through citizen conferences. But this nation was not one of those. Certain of this fact, Shikamaru kept his eyes on the castle as he spoke, not looking back at Soku behind him. Sai's report said this country's ruled by a man named Jingo. Maybe he's, not a daimyo. Right. Shikamaru caught sight of a man up ahead of them with a sharp gaze and clad in a long jet-black coat. His look was clearly different from the garb of the Land of Silence that Shikamaru and his team were wearing. His clothing resembled that worn by the Akatsuki, but his coat did not have the red cloud design, nor a collar that hid the neck up to the mouth like the coats of the Akatsuki. The closure was different from those fasteners too, with 5 large buttons decorated with silver attachments in a line from neck to waist. Don't you think we've come across a fair number dressed like that guy? I would state that I've also noticed this fact. Is it normal to just jump on board with whatever anyone says? After the fact? That look is mayhap our target. Shut up. Seriously, old man. Shikamaru ignored Soku's jab and continued. You ever see that guy before, Ro? Shikamaru turned his eyes on the couch set up on the red carpet in front of a tea shop in the corner of the street. Ro glanced back over his shoulder briefly before turning his face toward the tea shop, as if following Shikamaru's gaze. "It cannot be." What you mean? Don't follow. So you have, Shikamaru let Soku's words slide by and spoke to Ro. You've seen him before. The two looked at the man sitting on the couch, spine ramrod straight, drinking tea with his eyes closed. He, too, was wearing a long coat. The man called for someone in the shop. An elderly man, apparently the shop owner, came out, bobbing his head up and down over and over in a bow. The way he deprecated himself to the point of servility was the manner of a citizen currying favor with a daimyo or one of his attendants. That is Minoichi, who was a member of the Umbu. That man, he was, supposed to have gone missing in the Great War, Soku muttered, cutting Shikamaru off. The three of them averted their eyes to prevent Minoichi from noticing them and passed by the tea shop. This'd all be way faster if I just asked him directly. Fireworks shot off in his heart, and the corners of Shikamaru's mouth turned upward naturally. Infinity don't go moving anymore, Shikamaru said matter-of-factly to the man grinding his teeth, face tense far more than necessary. They were in a cul-de-sac. Shikamaru had deliberately chosen a place between reinforced concrete buildings that was damp and clammy even during the day. Not a soul was around. Ro and Soku were on lookout at the entrance to the cul-de-sac. Umbu masters who had infiltrated any number of places, the pair hid themselves in the shadow of a building and held their breath as they concentrated all their attention on the road, as darkness more intense than the gloom of the building's shadow oozed out from Shikamaru's feet. Crawling out from either foot, the darkness twined itself around the body of the man before him, creeping along the ground like 2 inky snakes. The snakes wound themselves around the man's torso before changing shape into an enormous hand, the fingers of which were slowly approaching the man's neck. Suffocating darkness. The house of Nara that Shikamaru had been born into was a family that had, for generations, excelled in the art of manipulating shadows. Suffocating darkness was a jutsu that bound his opponent's movements with his own shadow, a shadow that had physical power. Thus, not only was his enemy's body restrained, he could also inflict damage directly. I could strangle you with my shadow. I am possible. Why are you? You know who I am. According to Ro, this man was a ninja in the Konoha Umbu. It would have been no surprise to learn he knew of Shikamaru. I know your name, you know. Minoichi. I don't know that name. Don't play dumb with me. You're originally a Konoha shinobi, right? I don't know what you're talking about. He put more strength into his shadow as it crawled along Minoichi's body. The hand-shaped shadow hovering around his neck latched onto his Adam's apple. Ka! Minoichi cried out in anguish. If you were born in Konoha, then naturally you're aware of just what I can do with this jutsu of the House of Nara, aren't you? I could keep tightening this noose and kill you. That was the implied threat. What are you doing in here dressed like that? I am not a ninja anymore, Minoichi said in a hoarse voice, glaring at Shikamaru. I'm a revolutionary. All of you living your idle lives in the stagnant world of the ninja couldn't possibly understand our noble intentions. What kind of nonsense is this? I'm asking you what a revolutionary is, got it? The shadow fingertips tightened their grip. NGH. Minoichi groaned. I don't care if I end up strangling you to death, you know, he spat, feeling like he might throw up himself. His heart was being invaded by darkness. Even if I did explain it, you wouldn't NGH. Shikamaru pushed the shadow into the Adam's apple with an added burst of strength. If you're just going to talk garbage, then I really will do you in. His pupils were wide open as he stared at Minoichi. You understood, don't you mean understood, sir? Understood, sir. Shikamaru eased his shadow grip, and Minoichi coughed violently with teary eyes. Now, answer. What's a revolutionary? You guys used to be shinobi. What are you trying to do now? Minoichi's eyes darted in confusion at the rapid-fire questions. He looked at Shikamaru's cool face, instantly grasped that not a single wasted word would be permitted, and took a deep breath before starting to talk in a rush. This nation is ruled by us, the revolutionaries. There are none of such humble birth as the daimyo here. Revolutionary is the title used for those who were once shinobi, but who have since had their eyes opened by Lord Jango's divine will. Our objective, together with Lord Jango, is a true revolution in this world. No matter what you shinobi might plan, you are powerless before Lord Jango. Whatever you might hear from me, however you might try to learn the truth of this land, it is in vain, Minoichi said, and laughed. No. Minoichi slammed his jaw shut in an attempt to bite off his own tongue. No. Before his teeth could finish the job, something shot through Minoichi's neck. I pierced the chakra point to make his whole body go to sleep. He'll be out for, 3 days. Won't be able to move, Soka said, having come up to stand behind him at some point. Revolutionary, huh? Thinks he's, fancy or something. Totally, creepy. Pursing her lips, Soka stared down at Minoichi on the ground, his face peaceful as if he were truly asleep. The Land of Silence Chapter 2. Shikamaru didn't try to suppress his shivers at the chill reaching him through the concrete floor. The windowless walls and the ceiling were all also concrete. The three of them sat in a circle in the dark gray space. They were all wearing the long coats of the revolutionaries, all of them stolen. The room they sat in had belonged to one of the coat owners as well. That owner was unconscious in the closet in the next room, having been hit with Soka's chakra. They had interrogated them when they stole the coats, and had learned a number of things. The situation seems to be precisely as you had surmised, Lord Shikamaru. It was Ro who got the ball rolling. This land does indeed appear to be governed by this Jango, an intensely charismatic man, by all accounts. Ro said intensely charismatic, and Shikamaru was of the same opinion. They had captured 2 male revolutionaries, including Minoichi, for coats for Shikamaru and Ro, and 1 woman for Soku. Having interrogated all 3, Shikamaru could say the same thing about each of them. They had a devotion to and faith in Jango that bordered on the absurd. Their confidence in Jango was in a different category from the faith the shinobi of Konoha had in the Hokage or in Naruto. That was based in love and adoration for another person, respect toward another human being. Shikamaru believed this was the case in Konoha with the Hokage and Naruto. But it was different with Jango. Shikamaru saw within the revolutionaries a powerful force, more like the fear and reverence a person might have for a god. They accepted Jango unconditionally as a being fundamentally different from mere mortals such as themselves. Just who was this man who could stir people up to such an extent? Shikamaru was aware that a part of him was starting to take a simple interest in the man. So we, take care of Jango, and that's the end of it. The plan right from the start, Soka said, indifferently. That's why me and Pops here were, like, chosen. Opposite style, there'd be, like, nothing for us to do. Opposite, it'd all be, like, fine. Her use of opposite was not quite right, but she was basically on point. The feelings the revolutionaries have toward this man Jingo are essentially religious. I, like, totally agree, Soka said, nodding, and raised her hand. I mean, adoring this guy that much must be, like, something to him. What do you mean, something, Hinoko? Whoa! Shikamaru. I, like, told you not to use my name. The ends of her slender eyebrows jumping up, Soka jabbed the end of his nose with the index finger of her right hand, orange chakra lightning glittering and crackling at the tip. You call me by my name again and I'll shoot. She forgot to toss it, like. Why? It's a cute name, I hate it. The orange lightning crackled a little louder. A cool name like Garai or Shippu or Samidare would have been, like, way better. Even if she were a capable ninja, she was still a 14 or 15-year-old girl inside. Anyone would find her taste in preferred names childish, and Shikamaru stared at her, pushing back the laugh rising up in his throat. Perhaps mistaking his suppression of laughter for a serious look, Soku swallowed hard. Sorry. I didn't know you hate your name that much. I'll be more careful. As long as you, like, get it, Soku dropped her head, flustered. A map of Tobari was spread out at her feet. It belonged to the owner of the room. Viewing it in this fashion, it certainly is a spiderweb, Rose said, arms crossed. Shikamaru also dropped his eyes to the map. In the center of the village, which spread out in concentric circles, was a picture of an enormous castle. Below it were the words Fushu Castle. Fushu, an epithet to refer to prisoners in war or a savage tribe living in a central area, Ro noted. An epithet, huh? As he nodded at Ro's explanation, the gears in Shikamaru's head kept turning. So did Jingo give it this name then? Or was it called that before Jingo became its master? The Land of Silence has long shunned involvement with other nations. Thus, we of the Kono Anbu were also unable to speak to the name of this land's castle. Shikamaru felt somehow that Jingo had named it. A gut feeling. Which was why he didn't say anything to the other two. Why give a name like that to the key castle in your country, when they were at the center of the 5 great nations and the smaller neighboring nations, they themselves were in the end the savage tribe living on the borderlands? Perhaps they were being self-deprecating in using the term for themselves. Maybe. That's, like, ridiculous. Having listened quietly up to that point, Soko opened her mouth, dissatisfied. I think it's, like, way too demeaning, like an announcement that they're discriminating against themselves. I mean, you don't think it's weird that a bunch of backward-looking dopes like that would be trying to overthrow the foundations of the ninja world? She had forgotten her like again at the end. Soku was mad. But what was she mad at? Probably the people of this country positioning their own selves as savages. Maybe you bare your teeth sometimes exactly because you're cowardly, because you're backward-looking? Soku received this reply with a disgusted look. He met it head-on and continued. The desire for revenge comes from resentment toward an opponent, after all. And you don't necessarily have to touch someone directly to earn resentment like that, you know? Well then, Lord Shikamaru, do you mean to state that the people of this land resent the other nations? And that is, like, totally ridiculous, Soku interjected again. These revolutionaries in charge here now, I mean, they used to be ninja from other countries, though? It was just as Soka said. In interrogating their former code owners, they had learned that everyone in this nation's ruling class was originally a shinobi from another land. Some of those who had gone missing in the last Great War had made it to this country, along with the rogue ninja who had slipped away from the 5 great nations to the Land of Silence over the course of the last year, where they became revolutionaries and commanded the citizenry under Jingo. Apparently, a daimyo had ruled the country at some point in the past. But then Django had come along and chased out this head of state, created the revolutionaries, and reformed the nation's government from top to bottom. Governed by ninja now, the Land of Silence was currently doing well. If the revolutionaries resent the other countries, then that, means they've always resented their own villages. Some ninja do. Soku expelled an angry puff of air through her nose. Shikamaru maintained his cool tone as he pushed on. The majority of the Akatsuki, the ones that caused the last Great War, were rogue ninja. They were people who possessed unparalleled talents, but couldn't manage to make life in a group work for them. And they ended up hating the world of the ninja. When you were unhappy about the life you were forced to live, dark feelings started brewing inside you. And maybe those feelings led to a resentment of your own country. You ended up blaming your own misfortune and bad luck on the village structure and the world around you crumbling. None of it was your fault, it was the village, this world itself. Maybe once you took this emotional leap, it was only a matter of time before you turned into someone like the Akatsuki or the revolutionaries. Perhaps, Ro murmured, eyes still onto the map. Shikamaru and Soku waited for him to continue. The revolutionaries are precisely as you suggest, Lord Shikamaru, and hold within them dissatisfaction with the current state of shinobi. Yeah, Shikamaru managed to get in before Ro went on. And thus, they drifted to this land. However, is it not the case that the work they perform here differs in no way from their time in the world of the ninja? Ro was talking about how the revolutionaries put food on the table. They were former ninja. If they were so inclined, they could carry out as many ninja missions as they wanted. The revolutionaries of the Land of Silence used independent routes and hired themselves out to the various countries on the continent. They also undercut the standard prices set by the Alliance. For countries with small treasuries such as the minor and mid-sized nations, this was a real boon. And for enormous countries like the Five Great Nations, well, still nothing beat cheap. It was no wonder he had seen the number of requests coming into the Alliance plummet. Ro was exactly right. These people, who had come to the Land of Silence bitter about the current state of the ninja world, were copying the ways of the ninja here. It was actually funny. So, like a real revolution, Soku muttered, slowly. She exchanged glances with Shikamaru, and then looked up at the ceiling, embarrassed, as she began moving her thin lips. Minoichi, said it. He and Lord Django and the others want a real revolution. And that's why they're accepting work requests? Shikamaru asked, and Soku nodded. At any rate, we must ensure that we look upon the visage of this man Django. We, got a pretty good chance for that. Soku pointed to a slender finger at the plaza in front of Fushu Castle. Yes. The public lecture. The ideal stage for an assassination indeed. A crafty smile spread across the lips of the normally earnest and unaffected Ro as he looked at Shikamaru, almost as though he enjoyed killing. Shikamaru felt a keen, belated understanding that the man before him really was a member of the Umbu. Okay, Ro, you and me go into the plaza. We use your jutsu to mix into the crowd. If I get the chance to stretch my shadow out to Django, I'll go ahead and restrain him. Soku, you slip onto the roof of a building where you can look out over the plaza, and wait for your chance. If anything about Django changes, let your chakra arrow fly. Soku nodded with a malicious smile that in no way paled next to Ro's. I'm counting on you, Hanako. How many times do I, have to tell you to? Quit calling me by my name? Swept away by her anger, Soku leapt to her feet and looked down at Shikamaru indignantly. 40 times, Ro murmured. What? Soku glared at Ro, all thoughts of respect for her elders gone from her head, mouth a sharp line plunging downward on either side. But Ro did not flinch in the face of this wrath. Instead, he turned towards Soku and opened his mouth. The 4 of the character shirt in Shikamaru, and the 0 of Maru. That makes 40 times. And what happened to the old man? Ro hid behind their number-named leader, nimbly dodging Soku's kick. It was almost sad how he shrank himself, the old man past 40, the old man of large stature, the old man who was, in fact, senior to the girl before him. Perhaps he was simply playing at being mischievous, but it was just too creepy for Shikamaru. He couldn't bring himself to turn around and actually look at the ninja behind him. Is it actually going to be okay tomorrow? He asked the pair with a sigh. It'll, be fine. You have no cause for concern. They answered simultaneously. Shikamaru wedged between them as they glared at each other. He sighed yet again. End of chapters 1 and 2. Thank you for listening. Remember to like and subscribe for lots more.